Dr. Russell Sharp, and today we're going to be talking about traps, all things traps. It's a trap. What's that from? Star Wars? I think so. Anyway, so traps. The basic trap that you'll come across for pest and disease? No, just pests, is a yellow sticky trap. Yellow sticky traps are great. You can get small rectangular ones you get for controlling aphids and also any sorts of flying pest. And the reason they're yellow is because that is what aphids are actually attracted to. So you might think green would be the best colour, but it's actually yellow because yellow is indicative of a sick plant. So we think of plants that have gone chlorotic and yellow, and aphids find it easier to attack plants that are sick. We mentioned in the last podcast that aphids transfer viruses because viruses make the plant sicker and easier to attack. And so a yellow sticky trap is the colour that aphids have been drawn to and other pests are drawn to. And so the sticky trap. And then the stickiness is a chemical called polybutene. And that is the stickiest chemical that exists, the stickiest of the stickiest chemicals that has ever been synthesized. And we've had tubs of this arrive at our factory when we've been making traps in the past. And the delivery drivers have just thrown the parcel around and then it's all leaked out. And you think that's the worst thing they could have. They're not going to make that mistake ever again because they then got the stickiest of stickiest chemicals all over their van and their lorry. So polybutene is an extremely sticky chemical and takes hours and hours to wash it off your hand. And it's used on those traps. It can even be used on mouse traps, polybutene. And it's used on blue traps, red traps. You can get yellow sticky traps that go next to the soil surface. Oh, got the police coming past my window. And you've got the sticky traps that go next to the soil surface are great for controlling fungus gnats. They don't have to be yellow, though, for fungus gnats. Black is the best colour for fungus gnat traps. It's just that the reason you'll find yellow sticky traps used for fungus gnat is because yellow is the standard trap that is used routinely. It's the cheapest one to make because of the economies of scale. And so no one's bothered to produce a black sticky trap. We did work here at Utrema looking at a spray-on sticky trap using that polybutene in a form where it could be sprayed on. It wasn't sticky until the carrier had dissolved off, and you could spray this onto your pots. You could spray it onto the legs of the stilts that strawberries are grown onto and stop vine weevil travelling up to the strawberry plants. However, that was a product that never really took off, so we didn't commercialise it at all, but it sort of sits there in the back of my mind and if another problem occurs. So I say yellow sticky traps, polybutene, standard yellow plastic, and you'll see commercial greenhouses use plastic film, and then they just rolls and rolls of this film that then goes throughout the whole, so miles and miles of glasshouse, and that's used to control pests and disease and does a really good job. But the main use is the control use of the yellow sticky traps and also the monitoring. So you can get yellow sticky traps with squares on them, and then these squares, you can find the number of aphids or thrips or maybe even beneficials, and then you can monitor the population in your grow environment, and then you can replace them regularly so you know if the population has gone above the level in which you need to use either biological or chemical or another form of cultural control. So as I say, yellow sticky traps are the most common. Blues are used to attract thrips. Now, thrips will attract to yellows as well. However, blues are better because they get less beneficials attracted to them. And so you don't want your beneficial wasps, your parasitic wasps, your lacewings being attached to your sticky traps. And that's one of the disadvantages of sticky traps. It's also the reason they're not used outdoors, because you just get so many non-target organisms attracted to them. So if you do see them in an outdoor field, it's normally to measure the populations rather than actual control. I don't know of anyone who's using traps as a control method. Other colours of traps you might see are red traps. These are common in orchards, and I think these are used against Drosophila fruit fly. And they might have a bait in there, a sugary bait. Ammonium phosphate is sometimes used as a bait in traps in the European Union. That can be used. And you even now have synthetic pheromone traps where there's a pheromone that attracts the insect. It thinks it's going to mate, and then it's stuck to a trap. So codling moth and a number of other orchard-based pest and diseases, pheromones are now routine de rigueur in orchard crops. I don't know of any pheromone traps that are used in hydroponics. Traps can also be used for subterranean pests, and you can bury, I think you put wheat inside toilet rolls and bury them to get wireworms and monitor wireworm population and control wireworms in any sort of like potato crops that have been following grassland where you get a lot of wireworm pests. And even old doors are put down as traps for slugs, for monitoring slug populations. They're called slug hotels. And in the UK, there's a big project that is called Slimers, and all farmers and scientists are putting old doors in fields to monitor slug populations. So that's an interesting trap. And then if obviously you've got traps for deer, can you have true deer traps? No, what do I mean? Squirrel traps, mouse traps, rat traps, any rodent-based pests, you're going to have traps. And I said traps are not used for disease control or monitoring, but that's not actually true. They are used for two types of disease, and that's the diseases in the oomycete class of pathogens. So these are pathogens that are normally thought to be, were traditionally thought to be fungal, but they are not fungi. They are oomycetes, and that's because they are more closely related to algae, and they don't have chitin cell walls, and they have these things called zoospores. So rather than spores that just float around in the air, zoospores swim in water. And so the two that you are particularly going to be concerned with in hydroponics are Pythium and Phytophthora. These are bud rots, root rots, and they're very difficult to control with any type of fungicide. And they travel in water, so really wet conditions, and they particularly a problem whenever you've got a water tank that's being fed from rainwater or from any other source of natural water systems, and anywhere where there's decaying matter going into the water system. So in certain nurseries, they have bait traps where there's a bit of food, vegetable in the tank, and that is a signal to the zoospores to swim towards it to infect it. So they then look at they regularly take out the bit of decaying food and put it under a microscope and stain it and look for zoospores on it. And that might be an elaborate trap or a very simple trap. But look into that if you're suffering from root rot, rather than just, reaching for the peroxide every time. If you're suffering from Pythium or Phytophthora or the fungicide every time, have a look at the use of traps to find and see if you've got zoospores swimming around in your irrigation system. You might not realize it, but that's a big source of contamination. So you might be getting bud rots and not realize it's actually coming from the biofilms and the source of your water, especially if you're thinking, rainwater is the best possible option for your plants, thinking tap water is full of chlorine. Well, maybe that's a source of your Phytophthora bud rot. Certainly something to think about. And that's enough for today on Hydroponics Daily. Until tomorrow, thank you very much for listening. If you could leave a review, that would be fantastic. And I always thought that people asked for you to leave a review on podcasts because it helped with getting them up the charts. And I've actually come to the conclusion that asking for a review is because podcasters have no idea how many people are listening to them. And so it's just a nice way for people to know that people are listening to them, because the statistics you get back from the podcast hosting site are terrible. They just are not realistic they don't get any information. The only platform you actually get any real data that's meaningful is YouTube. And then where we host our podcast, that doesn't even use YouTube data. So if you can leave a review, that just lets us know that you're listening, and that is really useful. So even if you don't want to give us a 5-star review, it would mean the world if you found any of this useful over the last 3 months, if you could leave a review. So until tomorrow, thank you very much for listening, and see you all again soon.